Summary. The first day. Heaven, consciousness. Earth, manifestations of consciousness. We have a dual or split consciousness. Knowing and not knowing. Conscious and unconscious. Knowing is separated into manifested knowing and unmanifested knowing. The first day of creation deals with creation of light, day and night. The law of separation. Light as understanding. The second day. The second day deals with the comprehension of light created in the first day. We have 3 levels of consciousness. Below the firmament, our conscious. The firmament, unconscious or subconscious. Above the firmament, superconsciousness. Firmament is the foundation within us in order to know, understand, or comprehend God. Water is used to create forms of thought patterns. Water is the mystic force of life. The third day. In the third day of creation, we begin to understand ourselves by the functions of knowing and identifying. Memory is also an important process we use to understand ourselves and our Maker. Heaven is a state of consciousness. God is the electrical life force which animates the body into awareness. The third day's activity gives life to our thought forms, the planting of seeds and the bearing of fruits within us. The fourth day. In the fourth day all efforts are focused on using the earth elements, earth, water, fire, air, as part of the knowing process, or for the use of our consciousness. All the signs and seasons in our life are used as guidance along the way back to our Creator. 2 lights are used to guide us. Our ego, guiding and directing influence, we use mostly during the waking state in daytime, and our unconsciousness, the reservoir of all our memories, active when asleep, or in meditation. On Earth we use the 3-dimensional consciousness, and also the cosmic consciousness, or multidimensional consciousness. The fifth day. In the fifth day we are introduced to our instincts in relationship to our unconscious, and our use of will. And God said, Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. And God created great whales, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly, after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind, and God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful, and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth. And the evening and the morning were the fifth day. In previous days' creative efforts, we have seen the development of bodily forces in man, as a predicate for the development of rulership, or the directing factors needed by the elements themselves. In the fourth day's efforts we saw the setting of the foundation for 2 minds, the conscious and unconscious in us. The foundation for such, however, is not sufficient unless there is direction from the mind in the creative forces which set the foundation. It is thus that we are faced with the 5th and 6th days of creation. It was necessary for the unconscious mind and its abilities, the mind of the soul, to be developed to the point where it could comprehend a next step, once one had been made, along its evolutionary path. It needed to develop to the point at which it could handle evolution of the moving creature that hath life, for such creatures would manifest the evolutionary process back to the guiding principle. These living creatures were first in consciousness, and evolved into all manifested forms spoken of in verse 21. The sea is the outward manifestation of the unconscious, which is so much larger in scope than the conscious land area. In fact, about 70% of the Earth's surface is covered by the sea, as opposed to about 30% by land. The life forces in the unconscious, the sea, needed to manifest its potential. This it did, and does through the separate forms of life in the sea. This is shown in the moving creature that hath life, verse 20. These forms so developed into manifestations, which I take to represent the instincts that are our natural unconscious urges, which can only be recognized by bodily expressions. The instincts are fundamental to life, but only urge the body into action. They have no physical manifestations except through body reactions. Yet all life comes from the sea just as do our instinctual urges. In this fifth day there are only two types of creatures given, great whales, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. The great whale is not only the largest of such forms created, it is also the greatest of our unconscious, fleshly controlling factors. The will, symbolized by the whale, is a thyroid center activity. It can be an all-consuming factor in us, as illustrated by the story of Jonah. Was he not consumed, swallowed up, by the whale because he willfully would not go to Nineveh? In us the will acts just as if it were a fundamental flesh instinct, although it is separate and apart from the flesh instincts, for it is a quality which was given in the beginning before man entered the earth. Historically and biblically man was not created until the sixth day, yet because of the activity of the creative processes shown in the various days of creation, it should be quite clear that such days as shown are in reality the 7 stages of creative activity in us, and this includes the action of will. The fowl may well be taken to be expressions of the fleshly instincts. Since we air our desires to one another, they fly above the earth, above their source in us, above their lower glandular sources, for they are our fundamental animalistic natures. They fly in the open firmament of heaven, in consciousness. These instincts, fowl, are a vital part of the total life forces as they develop our total consciousness. We should notice that the fowls are mentioned in verse 20, also in 21 where we find the great whale. This shows that the instincts are one thing and the will another, they're being separately mentioned, yet both are developmental factors in the unconscious, the sea. We should keep in mind that the unconscious is the source of all guiding influences in life, and they all are subject to the will, yet at the same time both subject to the evolutionary processes. We should notice that in verse 21 we find a reference back to the third day where each thing created had the reproductive seed within itself, verse 11, and here we have each created thing brought forth abundantly, after their kind. We also should notice the admonition was to fill the waters in the seas, to develop fully the unconscious. However, not so with the fowls' instincts, for they were to multiply in the earth. Thus the instinctual forces help us fill the unconscious, and at the same time lend to its development. From this fifth day we should be able to agree with the evolutionary idea that birds evolved from creatures in the sea, for the expression, "Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life." Yet evolution is not our focus here. Our focus is on showing the relevancy of the days of creation to the operations of the endocrine system. The thyroid center seems to be more important than we may have thought. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful, and multiply." What is the first command by the Creator to man? Be thou fruitful and multiply. Yet this sets a natural law, a mental law, a spiritual law in motion, according to whether such activity is for the gratification of the flesh, of the mental self, or the fulfilling of a complete relationship to the creative forces. For there was nothing made that was made to which he had not given life, to whom he had not given, "Be ye fruitful, multiply, in thyself may there be the propagation of thine own species, of thine own self." As to give the future of anything, that dependent upon the thought, an active thought, of individuals, for, as was given of old, "Be thou fruitful and multiply, subdue the earth and that therein." It didn't say abuse the earth or that therein, nor use for thine own aggrandizement, for only that may be personally used from day to day is necessary. Considerest thou the lily and its beauty? It toils not, neither does it spin, yet Solomon in all his glory not arrayed as one of these. Wilt thou, then, thyself, be a channel? Or wilt thou attempt to turn the channels into thine own doing? Each soul pays for his own shortcomings, not someone else's. Then, in applying the spiritual, mental and material laws so as to make all of these coordinate in their relationship one to another, this is what was meant by the command to the individual soul to be fruitful, to multiply, to subdue the earth. Disease arises from First, disease as a normalcy that is existent and yet becomes unbalanced. Disease is, a state at variance to the ideal or first cause or first principle. Then, in its final analysis, disease might be called sin. It is necessary to keep a balance. And those who are in a material world are naturally subject to, and in contact with, sin. Thus the individual entity or soul entity is to meet, to come in contact with, to overcome, to subdue same. 4. What is the first premise? Be fruitful, multiply, but subdue the earth. Then, disease is of the earth earthy. Man was made in the image of God. Thus he was given the injunction, be fruitful, multiply, but subdue the earth. The purposes, the ideals as indicated lie within self and not in the expressions about self, or even to self. While such may be as symbols, or as helpful influences, know that the body is the temple of the living God, and there ye may meet that divine. Whether these are to be fruitful in the activities and associations will depend upon the choices. And these can only be made by purposes within self. For in the solar system each planet is relative to another. So each entity, each soul, is in its relation relative one to another. For the injunction or law is, be fruitful, multiply, but subdue the earth. And the other stars, the sun, the moon were all given to be the servants and not rulers of man. Don't forget it. For what has been the command to those that came into the earth? Be fruitful, multiply, subdue the earth. In the beginning there is seen that creative energy, taking all things in that collective and individual mass, bringing through that action of energy in creative force on same, in the nature of each element's relation one to another in same, and in individuality, bringing all then to that point of its returnability, as it were, through the action of spirit energy in same, to its various forms, and in the creative force as manifest in man's appearance, that representative of the Godhead. Made manifest in this earth or material plane, with the abilities of the whole, as is yet given existence, and with that added portion of God to become one with that whole mass, then we find how man becomes the one given that charge, be fruitful, multiply, subdue the earth, giving then to man that of the representative force in material plane of the representative of the Godhead, or creative energy, with that ability to control same through that same force in which first creative energy given, plus the will's force manifest in material basis, for the combination of these masses, in group and in individual form, to create in a manifested form and manner. Unconsciousness. Does death instantly end all feeling in the physical body? If not, how long can it feel? This would be such a problem, dependent upon the character of which unconsciousness is produced to the physical reaction, or the manner in which the consciousness has been trained. Death, as commonly spoken of, is only passing through God's other door. That there is continued consciousness is evidenced, ever, by the associations of influences, the abilities of entities to project, or to make those impressions upon the consciousness of sensitives, or the like. For as an individual entity arises each day from physical rest, or from physical unconsciousness, to the new opportunities of each day, just so may an entity take those experiences, through the various periods of sojourn in the earth, or those realms of consciousness, and activity attained in those environs during the interims between the earthly sojourns, as the basis upon which to build in the present. What happens to this body? Dependent upon the manner it has applied itself during those periods of its waking state. Take time to sleep. It is the exercising of a faculty, a condition that is meant to be a part of the experience of each soul. It is as but the shadow of life, or lives, or experiences, as each day of an experience is a part of the whole that is being builded by an entity, a soul. And each night is as but a period of putting away, storing up into the superconscious, or the unconsciousness of the soul itself. The Leiden, Leidig, or closed gland is the keeper of the door, that would loose and let either passion, or the miracle be loose to enable those seeking to find the open door, or the way to find expression in the attributes of the imaginative forces in their manifestation in the sensory forces of a body, whether to fingertips that would write, to eyes that would see, to voice that would speak, to the whole of the system, as would feel those impressions that are attuned with those the infinite by their development and association, or with those interbetween, or those just passed over, or as to the unseen forces. For the world of unconsciousness is not in a material change from the physical world save as to its attributes, or of its relationships with. Whether the vision has been raised or lowered depends upon that height, depth, breadth or length it has gone for its source of supply. Will. In the application of these planetary influences, these are altered, changed or modified often by the application of will, which makes of man that difference between man and the rest of creation, as related to the earth or material plane, for in man's manifestation there are seen the elements and the abilities of all creation as manifested in this material plane. The application of will, as toward influences in the life, alters or changes the development of the inner man, the soul. When these are in accord with the divine, or the creative influences, hold to that which is good, cleave to that which is right. In all influences, as are seen, that are as standards or as signposts along life's way, these are written, as it were, in the astrological influences, that have influenced and do influence an entity through any given experience or time. Yet, as has oft been given, there is no influence in the experience of an entity that does surpass the will, or the ability to act or react as is the gift of every individual that is a child of the creative forces, or God, for that is which makes an entity, a soul, godlike, the ability to choose or to will that which its attributes, or its mind or body may be used in this, or that expression of the attributes of that it worships. It is true that from the astrological aspects the entity has diverted and is diverting some of the manifested urges. Yet, know that no urge, no sign, no emotion, whether of a latent mental nature, or of a material or emotional nature finding expression in the body, surpasses that birthright, will, the factor which makes the human soul, the human individual, different from all other creatures in the earth, from all manifestations of God's activity. For he, man, has been made just a little lower than the angels, with all the abilities to become one with him. Not the whole, nor yet lost in the individuality of the whole, but becoming more and more personal in all of its consciousnesses of the application of the individuality of creative forces, thus more and more at one with him, yet conscious of being himself. The second problem concerns that which is variously called evil, darkness, negation, sin. Should it be said that this condition existed as a necessary element of creation, and the soul, given free will, found itself with the power to indulge in it, or lose itself in it? Or should it be said that this is a condition created by the activity of the soul itself? Should it be described, in either case, as a state of consciousness, a gradual lack of awareness of self and self's relation to God? It is the free will, and its losing itself in its relationship to God. There are those consciousnesses or awarenesses that have not participated in nor been a part of Earth's physical consciousness, as the angels, the archangels, the masters to whom there has been attainment, and to those influences that have prepared the way. Realms of systems came into being, as vast as the power of thought in attempting to understand infinity, or to comprehend that there is no space or time. Yet time and space, in patience, you may comprehend. Uranus. Extremes. In Uranus we find that influence making for the eccentricities of the entity, those periods when there are apparently very good influences, and at others very bad in every relationship. In Uranus we find that indicating the confusions, at times, by the very inabilities for the entity, under its environs in the present, to coordinate the extremes that arise in its experience. We find also in those astrological sojourns or influences in Uranus making for extremes, that the entity through its earthly as well as through the innate forces that have been impelled or chosen by self has found itself swinging, as it were, oft suddenly from extreme to extreme. Those forces as is find from the astrological aspects in Uranus make for the extremes in the experiences of the association, rather than in self. For as self has been, as self is well balanced in its ideas and ideal, to such an individual there oft appears to be much that makes for turmoils or indecisions in the minds or activities at least of others. Hence keep quiet and at peace within, and we will find extremes becoming means in ways and manners and activities that are befitting those that set their ideals in the spiritual forces. For in Uranus we find the extremes, and when the entity is very good it's very, very good, when it's bad, it's awful. These become extremes then in the experience. From the influences in Uranus we find the extremes, and indeed the entity has in the present experience known extremes, the good, the bad.